Ladies and gentlemen, a very good morning to all of you. First and foremost, I'd like to wish everyone present here today a very happy International Women's Day in advance. And in celebration of Women's Day, it is my pleasure to warmly welcome you all to the Colombo Stock Exchange as we prepare to ring the bell for gender equality for the 7th consecutive year in Sri Lanka. With that being said, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to invite you all to please rise for the national anthem.
Sri Lanka Mata, Apa Sri Lanka, Namo, 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 Namo Mata. Sundara Siri Varini, Surani Apisobamana Lanka. Sapasiri seta sadana jeevanaye mata piliganu mena apavakti puja namo namo mata apa Sri Lanka namo 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 mata ubave apavinda
The Ring the Bell for Gender Equality ceremony is a momentous occasion organized in partnership with the International Finance Corporation, the Sustainable Stock Exchanges Initiative, the Australian High Commission, the Sri Lanka Institute of Directors, the United Nations Global Compact, the World Federation of Exchanges, and the United Nations Women. In celebration of International Women's Day falling tomorrow, that is on the 8th of March 2022, a record 118 stock exchanges around the world will ring their market opening or closing bells to signify the importance of the role played by stock exchanges around the world in advancing women's equality. Our partner organization for this initiative today, the International Finance Corporation, also known as the IFC, is a sister organization of the World Bank and a member of the World Bank Group. And it is the largest global development institution focused on the private sector in emerging markets. The IFC works in more than 100 countries using its capital, expertise, and valuable influence to create markets and opportunities where they are needed the most. And this prized contribution was evident in the fiscal year 2021, where the IFC committed a record $31.5 billion to private companies and financial institutions in developing countries, leveraging the power of the private sector to end extreme poverty and thereby boost shared prosperity by lending a helping hand to economies grappling with the impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic. So, ladies and gentlemen, as we commemorate this special day for a special cause, I'd like to formally commence the order of proceedings this morning as we present to you video messages from the Colombo Stock Exchange and the International Finance Corporation to enlighten and demonstrate the significance of women on boards.
The Colombo Stock Exchange believes that fostering gender equality and women's empowerment in the workplace, marketplace and community is pivotal to achieving commercial and sustainable development. Sri Lankan women have played an instrumental part in our country's history and have an even more significant role to play in shaping its future.
The CSE leadership has also prioritized implementing progressive policies and procedures that lay a strong foundation where equal opportunities can prosper. Policies that ensure women are safe, respected, treated fairly, empowered, and are provided with the support they need to achieve personal and professional growth.
Some of the most crucial decisions that affect the Sri Lankan capital market and the business functions that are decisive to the smooth functioning of the markets are effectively delivered by women. Women who join the exchange at a young age and thrive in an environment of opportunity going on to make an impact.
CSE's sound gender representation over the years has translated to a strong representation of women in our senior management. As the operator of the stock market, CSE is uniquely placed to advocate for advancing gender equality across all levels in Sri Lanka.
CSE listed companies are regularly encouraged to prioritize diversity in their own corporate structures by implementing gender-friendly workplace policies, reporting on diversity objectives and practices, and increasing the number of women holding board and senior leadership positions. Since 2016, and as one of the initial exchanges to do so, CSE has joined peer exchanges from around the world and other international and local partners to ring the bell for gender equality in celebration of International Women's Day. These events have been successful in gathering the Sri Lankan corporate community to drive a unified call to action to advance gender equality. 10.1% of board directors of listed companies in Sri Lanka are women. However, much needs to be done as this does fall short of regional market representation, and as such, there continues to be a requirement for progress. Empowering and inspiring the women of tomorrow to be financially aware and independent, we believe is important to paving the way for true progress for women. It is with this objective that CSE works on improving accessibility of capital market services to female entrepreneurs of all ages through our financial literacy and investor education programs. Starting in 2022, CSE aims to further advance gender equality as a signatory of the United Nations Women's Empowerment Principles. The WEPs will provide a platform for CSE to further strengthen our women's empowerment initiatives internally and in the community.
We believe that all efforts should be made to close the economic gender gap, and this should not be a responsibility that we pass on to the next generations.
Substantial progress can be achieved if all like-minded and progressive institutions and individuals work together to create opportunities for Sri Lankan women.
The CSE would encourage all corporates and capital market stakeholders to help with driving this change, to enhance and capitalize on the skills of women today, and to embrace the promise of women aspiring to be leaders of tomorrow.
Women on boards to make the policy changes at the workplaces so that workplaces are more women friendly. We also need them to take the conversations to a broad audience and talk about the challenges both at the workplace and at home. Cultural factors play a large role in this, and we need corporates to change their advertising to be more gender conscious and help bring about the conversations at home, at the workplaces, and in society.
I now have the pleasure of inviting the chairman of the Colombo Stock Exchange, Mr. Dumit Fernando, to deliver the opening remarks of the ceremony.
Good morning, everyone. As I welcome you all to this special event on International Women's Day, I would like to recognize some special guests we have with us. Firstly, the Australian High Commissioner, Your Excellency David Hawley, the Chairman of the SEC, Mr. Viraj Dayaratne, the IFC Country Manager for Sri Lanka and the Maldives, Lisa Kessner, our keynote speaker, Tushara Wijewardena, our other speakers, including Faisal Saleh and Lopa Rahman, who will join us online, our panel participants, partner of Ernst & Young, Ms. Anoji De Silva, Chairman of John Kills Holdings, Krishan Balendra, Chairman of Hella Apparels, Mr. Rasakant Rasaya, and the Program Manager for IFC DFAT Women in Work Program, Sarah Twigg. Now, I can give you a warm and fuzzy welcome speech like I have done for the last 2 years where I've welcomed people to this event. But I know you all have very important things that you do and your time is precious, so I will not waste the time on just warm and fuzzy. As was said earlier today, the Ring the Bell ceremony is a call to action. And I think we should really focus on that. When the status quo performs at its best, the result is usually the status quo. And I think that is what this event is today for us. We saw in the CSE video some of the information and stats around where we are in our listed corporates. We have, at the highest level, 10% of boards being represented by women. Are we proud of this? I would personally say that I am not, and we should not be. I think the statistics and the data shows that there is a long way for us to go in this, and that the benefits of better representation at the senior-most level can have great economic and business impact. I know these data points will probably come through in the presentations after my speech, so I will not delve into that. However, I would say that for us at the CSE, there are many topics that we discuss and embrace when it comes to equality and especially gender equality, and how we do that within our firm, as within our exchange, you again saw on this video, but as a matter of policy, as a matter that extends beyond the stock exchange and extends to one of our key stakeholders, which is our listed companies, the most important issue at the moment is representation of women on boards. So I would say our call to action today has to be around that and the other actions which we seem to have talked about for many years. We've rung the bell for 7 years, as you saw. The question is, are we happy with the progress we've made in that 7 years? Is this call to action and ringing the bell yielding results? And I would like for us to try and focus on that. And I think it is important that the stock exchange does that, because we do ultimately represent 300 listed companies, most of whom are some of the poster children of industry and economy in this country. So there are just simply 3 things that I think we should really actively start focusing on. The first is the fundamentals. It's understanding the information and the data. Understanding the data and research around the benefits of better gender representation, especially on our boards, is, I think, very important. We saw during the pandemic what deniers of data and research did to their countries, and the pandemic situation worsened in all of those countries. So it is similar in this case. I think if we deny the data and the research on this topic, we will never actually make progress. If you look at data like the returns of companies with better gender representation on boards compared to those without, the fact that research shows banks with better gender representation on their boards have a lower incidence of fraud. The fact that you actually need not just one, but at least 2 to 3 women on a board to get the best out of those women on the board, to create a comfortable zone where they perform the best. That is proven through data as well. And that's why 10% is not enough. The second point I would like to make is it is very clear through experience around the world that intervention is needed. And as I said before, status quo will lead to only status quo. Intervention is needed in many forms. It doesn't mean mandates and legislation alone. I think there are many other ways in which intervention can happen. And that is due to another very important factor, which is unconscious bias, which I'm sure we will hear about later today. And the third point I would call out, not just to everyone here, but to everyone, particularly in listed companies, which comes within our remit, is showing leadership. It is easy to cower behind our peer groups and communities and say what's popular in our boardrooms and our committees. But that behavior never made change. So it is really important for us to understand the information, the data, the research, understand that intervention is needed. Again, that's not because I say so or someone says so without facts behind it. The facts suggest that. And for us to then take that step of saying, what do I have to do? So this is a community factor, but communities start with leaders. And I call out, not just at the exchange, and we know we've got work to do even within the exchange, but to every single corporate leader within the listed company universe, to embrace today, not just to host token events, but to embrace the fact that this is an area where we need to focus on. This is an area that will progress our companies, our economy, and the strength of our social structures. Welcome again, and I look forward to all the wisdom that I'm sure many of you are looking forward to sharing with us today.
Thank you very much, Mr. Fernando. May I now kindly invite on stage the High Commissioner of the Australian High Commission in Sri Lanka, His Excellency David Hawley, to address the gathering.
Distinguished guests, Aibawan, Bainakam, Assalamu alaikum, and g'day. Can I just say what a very stirring presentation, Dimit. Thank you very, very much for that. And I'm not going to take much more time because I think you've said a lot of what I was going to remark about. But I am sort of here to explain a little bit about why Australia is here and why in those last series of photos for the last 6 years, Australia's been very pleased to participate through IFC in the Ring the Bell initiative. Because this stock exchange, by ringing the bell, in addition to standing up for what is happening in this country, is joining with many exchanges, in fact almost all, across the world in ringing the bell for gender equality. And I think that just needs to be applauded. Let's do that now. This global movement creates a platform to raise awareness on the important contribution of women to our economies and the strong business case that underpins that. We all know that, you're business people that are here, and we know that if we deny part of our population to be able to be part of what is a fundamental drive in our economy, the productivity of our economy, then we are going to always be hampered and never be able to ensure that livelihoods and the improvements in the families and the welfare of our citizens can continue on. I would say that COVID-19 has not been a good disruptor for gender equality. And I think we'll hear a little bit more of that from the panel discussion today. But in many cases, we have seen regression on many of the areas that have been moving to improvement. One measure, of course, is employment. Where other areas are income levels, but behind all of that, there are other areas, particularly in the case of gender-based violence at home, and also the need for, in many cases, women to be continuing to support the vulnerable, or that role being given to women to support the vulnerable in households. So there are many, many obstacles and challenges, but I just want to put one positive spin, if I may, just to say that we do need to stand up, we do need to recognise what is going on, and to be able to raise awareness of this. And when businesses of the stature of those that belong to the CSE can come together and ensure that that message is driven loud and clear through a ringing of the bell, but through the actions of so many of you in your workplaces, right through from the work floor up to the boardrooms, that is really very, very inspiring. This year is the 75th year of bilateral relations between Sri Lanka and Australia. Many of you are just doing quickly the maths and said, hold on, we've just celebrated our 74th year of independence. How can we have 75 years? A quick story that in 1946 the Australian Parliament decided to send a commissioner here because we recognised that Sri Lanka would become an independent country, and so in 1947 a commissioner came, and then of course on the 4th of February 1948 when you were granted dominion from the United Kingdom, our commissioner became a High Commissioner, and so we're very proud of the partnership that has come through that. But of course, this partnership is one which just continues to endure the strengthening of the linkages between our two countries. And we're very pleased to be continuing to work in the Women in Work partnership, particularly through the IFC, to be able to continue on that engagement. Many of you that are here today are partners with us through that program and are helping deliver aspects of it. For example, the She Works partnership, where we've had a coalition of business who are committed to advancing gender equality within their organisations. And now that work and the representation of that work that's done here in Sri Lanka is being used as examples that have been taken all over the world of what could be done in the She Works area. We've also supported the central bank to develop Sri Lanka's first ever national inclusion strategy, and paving the way for more equitable access for financial products and services for women. We've supported the Women in Management Awards, an annual event that celebrates the exemplary achievements of women, and I was very honoured to be part of the recent awards with 50 more women being recognised for their achievements. And we also support initiatives to encourage more women to take up board positions, a key passion of this stock exchange. So through Women in Work and our partnership with IFC, we'll continue to support what is happening here, but also take particular attention to the outcomes that have resulted from COVID-19, and additionally where additional support might be needed from countries in partnership with Sri Lanka. So again, I won't take more time, but I wanted to thank you again for inviting me, for allowing us to partner with you through the IFC to take forward this really very, very strong and important message. It's not just one for Sri Lanka, this is something we are also working on very much in Australia as well. And when we find like-minded countries that are wanting to pick up this challenge, it is our duty to work with you. So thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Your Excellency. I now invite the chairman of the Sri Lankan Institute of Directors, Mr. Faisal Saleh, on stage to address the gathering.
Thank you. Your Excellency, the High Commissioner for Australia, Chairman SCC, Chairman CSE, Country Head IFC, Krishan, Ras, distinguished invitees, ladies, and gentlemen. It's my pleasure to be part of this celebration on behalf of the Sri Lanka Institute of Directors, for whom will this bell toll today? It will certainly toll for all the women in the world of work, business, and society. Women do matter, and for sure, they're getting better and better. The bell will also toll for all those men who continue to champion the progression of women into higher executive management and into the boards of companies. The bell is also a grim reminder to those men who are yet to step out of their traditional mindsets and reach out to welcome more women as equal colleagues in the boardroom. Just as much as there is a sound business case for good corporate governance, there is a sound business case emerging for more competent women to get on boards. The men in our boardrooms should take heed of this business case and step out to embrace the female value proposition with maturity and fairness. The Sri Lanka Institute of Directors stands firmly committed to gender equality and inclusivity. It is a strong focal point of our advocacy agenda and an integral part of our broader and larger board diversity agenda. Our drive for gender equality and inclusivity is beyond any semblance of tokenism. Among the many forums we have created, we have a Women Directors Forum, which is entirely dedicated to grooming and building capacity for women directors and aspiring directors. We have been working closely with the likes of the IFC, Australian Aid, the CSE, the CSE, and other like-minded institutions and people in pursuing greater participation for women in business and on company boards. And we shall continue to do everything possible to enable companies build and facilitate that process. In this journey of ours, as arduous and challenging as it may be, our companies also need to facilitate and grow the supply side of competent women for higher management roles and break the traditional mind blocks and any embedded biases on gender, age, or ethnicity that might exist in their processes when admitting directors to company boards. All that said, I would urge corporate Sri Lanka to please respond to the call of the bell and come together to build better boards with better women. Ladies and gentlemen, I was told that this podium for today's ringing of the bell initially looked rather heavy on the side of men. So as a small gesture on the part of the Sri Lanka Institute of Directors, I will stay off the podium and let a female colleague from our board join the ringing of the bell. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Saleh. We now have Ms. Lopa Rahman, the Environmental, Social and Governance Officer of the IFC, presenting to you the business case for gender diversity on boards, which includes a research of the findings from Sri Lanka.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's a pleasure for me to be able to present our research findings to substantiate the business case for women on boards and celebrate International Women's Day. It has been an honor for me to organize these events for the last 7 years, together with our partners Colombo Stock Exchange, UN Women, UN Global Compact, Sri Lanka Institute of Directors, and of course the Government of Australia under the IFC DFAT Women in Work program. Today, I share the findings from our report entitled Realizing Sustainability Through Diversity, the case for gender diversity among Sri Lankan business leadership. This is an update from our previous edition, which was published in 2019. In Sri Lanka, we've been very fortunate to have the Colombo Stock Exchange as an extremely supportive partner in providing us data as we've been tracking very closely female appointments on board since 2018. For this report, the financial data analysis was conducted using publicly available information from websites and company annual reports. Our primary level research was conducted using interviews with both male and female board members and senior management from the top listed 30 companies. Together, these 30 companies account for approximately 60% of total market capitalization of Colombo Stock Exchange. So they are fairly representative of the CSE index. In order to analyze the relationship between gender diversity in business leadership positions and financial performance, we collected a series of financial variables to calculate return on asset, return on equity, price earning ratio. The gender variables included women on boards, women as independent directors, women on audit committees, women in senior management, and women in senior leadership positions, which is a combination of women on boards and those in senior management. So in total, there were 238 firm year observations for the 5 years data that we collected. We used coefficient and regression analysis to conclude the correlation between gender diversity and financial performance of companies. Now, having said that, the business case for gender diversity and gender balance at the top goes beyond financial performance. Companies with enhanced environmental, social, and governance standards also outperform their other companies on critical metrics such as stronger internal controls, management oversight, reduced risk of fraud and other ethical violations, positive workforce environment, greater stakeholder engagement, improved reputation and brand, leading to overall business better performance. Ultimately, diversity is about ensuring companies' competitiveness, performance, and long-term sustainability. The authors have been very conservative in proposing that there's a causality, but we are just reporting on the findings that we have received from the research. As you can see from this chart, there has been a growth in the number of women that are represented on the boards of CSE listed companies. And there's been a sharp increase in this from 2018 to 2020. Post-announcement made by the Ministry of Finance on progressive quotas. Now, what is interesting to note is that the growth has been stable even post-COVID and has increased marginally in 2020, and it has reached 10.1%. Total number of board positions occupied by women in 2022 is 240, representing an increase of 96 board positions that have been added since 2018, which are occupied by women. A shining example of a new female board appointment is our keynote speaker who will be speaking here today. Now, what are the findings from the top 30 largest listed companies on Colombo Stock Exchange? We found that the board size varies from 5 to 17 and these are companies between 2015 and 2019 with a median of 10 members. The typical board has 1 woman among its members. 40% or 12 of the top 30 companies have all male boards. Less than 5% of companies have 3 or more women on the board. Around 2/3 of the companies do not have any female independent director. 2/3 of the audit committees are all male. while only around 10% of audit committees have 2 or more women as members. Only one company had a board chairing its board for just one single year. Senior management position of the largest companies on Colombo Stock Exchange, where women make up around 20% of senior management teams, with the median company having 2 women in C-suite. The typical size of the senior management team is 15 members. Women occupy less than 1/4 of the senior management position for 75% of these companies at the sample. Women in business leadership position, which is board and senior management together, vary between 0 to 11, with a median presence of 3 women. So in order to achieve gender diversity at the board, there is a strong need to also strengthen the pipeline and have more women in senior management positions. Now, the findings from the regression and correlation analysis. So to analyze the relationship between gender diversity and financial performance, the companies were segregated into 2 groups based on their gender diversity on board. The groups of firms at the top third versus the group of companies at the bottom. And the results show that on average, companies with higher board gender diversity exhibit better financial indicators than those with lower gender diversity in terms of return on equity and return on total assets. When we compared the similar analysis and included the women as among independent directors, and the results show that on average, companies belonging to the group with a higher proportion of women among independent directors exhibit about 20% higher return on equity and return on total assets. Similarly, when we compared companies in the top companies' performance indicators of firms that belong to the top 33% versus the bottom 33% in percentage of women in business leadership, it shows that on average, the companies from groups with higher gender diversity exhibit better financial indicators. And this is true for return on equity, return on total assets, and also price earning ratio. In terms of the percentage of women on audit committees from the top 30 companies, again, this chart shows that on average, the group of companies with more women on audit committees exhibit 20 to 30% higher return on equity and return on total assets. And this is significant to 10% level of statistical significance. We also studied companies with female leadership at the helm, either as chair or vice chair. These were predominantly in 2 sectors, bank, finance, and insurance, and manufacturing. On these companies, we found that on average, there were 8 to 10 times smaller compared to companies that were headed by men. And these were in terms of total assets, their market capitalization, and total revenue. So the larger companies were all headed by men on the Colombo Stock Exchange. So to summarize our key findings, the correlation between gender diversity and 10 of the 15 financial performance variables studied were mostly positive. Due to the relatively small sample size, not all the results were statistically significant. However, all indicated a positive relationship between gender diversity and financial performance. The share of women among independent directors is positively correlated with return on total assets, suggesting companies with a higher share of women independent directors also had higher asset values, and this was statistically significant at 10% level. The share of women on senior management teams and in business leadership positions is also positively correlated with price to earning ratio, and this is statistically significant at 5% and 10% levels respectively. You can avail further details on our report, which will be made available on our website. Please do take a look. And thank you so much for your patient hearing, and look forward to a great event. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Rahman, for a very informative presentation on the subject. Ladies and gentlemen, we now arrive at one of the most anticipated moments of today's agenda. For the first time in the history of Ring the Bell for Gender Equality ceremonies, it is my absolute pleasure to invite a few distinguished individuals present here today for an engaging and compelling panel discussion that has been organized for you in order to discuss the business case for gender diversity on boards. And to do the honors, let me introduce to you the dynamic panelists we have for today. Ms. Anoji De Silva, partner at Ernst & Young. Mr. Krishan Balendra, chairman of John Keells Holding PLC. Mr. A.R. Razaya, chairman of Heller Apparel Holdings Limited. And of course, the moderator for this discussion, Ms. Sarah Twigg, program manager, Women in Work, IFC. Ladies and gentlemen, the stage is all yours.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for having us. So, my name's Sarah Twigg. I'm the Program Manager for IFC's Women in Work program. What we're going to do for the next sort of 45 minutes or so is really talk a bit more about what needs to happen to break this status quo. I think we've heard a lot about the status quo. We've seen how slowly the statistics are changing. I was doing some back-of-the-envelope calculations, and it's going to take us at least 40 years to get to even 30% women on boards at the current rate. Now, that's just not good enough. So I'm very, very happy to have this distinguished panel with me. On the far end, we have Mr. Krishan Balendra, who I'm sure needs no introduction. He is the chairman and CEO of John Keells Holdings. He's also a director of the Ceylon Chamber of Commerce and the Honourable Consul General of the Republic of Poland in Sri Lanka. He is also a former chairman of Nations Trust Bank and the Colombo Stock Exchange. Next to him, we have Ms. Anoji De Silva, who was the second female to ever be appointed a partner of Ernst & Young in Sri Lanka. They now have 35% of the partnership are women. She's also a CA Sri Lanka Council member and serves on several committees to promote accountancy as well as women's leadership. She's the chairperson of the Women's Chamber of Industry and Commerce and was a gold winner of the Women in Management Top 50 Career and Professional Awards in Financial Services in 2018. And on my right here, we have Mr. Rasakant Rasaya, chairman of Heller Apparel and director of many other public listed companies. He's the former finance director of Nestle Lanka, the former chairman of Atlas Axelia, and former senior director of Nations Trust Bank, as well as the former chairman of the Sri Lanka Institute of Directors. So, Mr. Balendra, we might start with a question for you. Now, in recent years, John Keells has really made a strong push towards creating greater gender balance across your organisation, with a particular focus on women in corporate leadership roles, including on the boards of John Keells subsidiary companies. Can you talk a bit about, I guess, what prompted this focus, and what are some of the practical steps that John Keells is taking to actually implement this change?
Thanks, Sarah. I think when we looked at the figures in our organization, while we were focused on recruiting women, and we found that actually over 50% of our recruits were women, but as you went up the seniority ladder, that number reduced. So we were recruiting, but there was a problem with retaining women in the organization. But more than just that piece of data, I think we felt it was good for business and good for the country and the economy. One of our big sectors is the hotel sector, and in particular since 2009, when we saw this surge in tourism and more hotels being built, we saw had this big challenge of finding people to work at hotels. And then we realized how few women applied for positions at the hotel level. There is this whole mental block about working in hotels, in the villages in particular, about women working in hotels. And really, if our hotel business and the country's tourism business, which has so much potential, is going to fulfill its potential, we are going to need more women in working in hotels. And I think as a country we need to really focus on that. So that, as well as prior to my taking on this role as chairman of the group, I ran the supermarkets business at John Keells, and we used to have these debates about service levels and what we can do to improve the business. And it just struck me that there was a group of men debating this when most of our customers were women. So, sir, it's very clear that it's good for business to have more women, and in particular at the senior levels where, in that sort of the real policy debates and strategic discussions happen. So what have we done? We've now set ourselves targets, actually because of our, some of our businesses have a disproportionately high female representation at the lower levels. About 28% of our workforce in the group is female. But as I said earlier, at the senior levels, it's very low. So we've now set ourselves targets, a group target to achieve in 5 years. And that has been sort of distilled into each of the businesses, the different levels. So all the business and functional heads have different targets to take the overall group target, to achieve the overall group target, which is to, in 5 years, take it from 28% currently to 40% or more. We've started sessions on unconscious bias, corporate culture, mentoring. One of the other big issues we've identified about why we can't retain females don't stay longer is flexi working hours. So we are going to continue a hybrid work model beyond the pandemic. We've now started offering creche facilities for our staff. So number of measures now which all come under a branded initiative in the group, which is branded One JKH. So all our diversity, equity and inclusion initiatives come under the One JKH brand, which gives it a greater focus within the organization and outside.
That's great, thank you. And it's fantastic to hear that you've set such an ambitious target of 40% for the organisation. I think there are many others out there who will be taking note of that. Mr. Russia, if I can turn to you and maybe reflect a little bit about in your former role as the chairman of the Sri Lanka Institute of Directors, where you oversaw a really strong push by SLID towards getting more women on boards in general, but in particular on listed companies, including through the introduction of the soft quotas in the budget in 2019. So can you maybe reflect a bit on why this was such an important agenda for SLID, and what are some of the other ways that SLID continues to work to advance the role of women on boards?
Yes, at the very outset, I must say it was just a coincidence that I was chairman when this initiative came. But we did give all seriousness and importance to it. So we appointed one of our vice chairmen to head it, Arushi. She's also very forceful, what shall I say, a ball of fire to lead the side. She did start, and there was a very good response, initial response from the ladies in the corporate world. So that's how we started. That was very, very encouraging, and then we started to have our seminars. So we did not stop there. We went one step further, trying to make our links with the international forum. So that also will give a lot of weight, a lot of encouragement for people, for ladies to join our FIRE sector. So we became, or what shall I say, we made links with the corporate directors chapter internationally. They very readily helped us. They made us the local representative. And they also gave us certain free membership provided we satisfied certain conditions. One of the conditions, for example, was if a lady director has been a director for 5 years, then they get free membership. So in that way, there were about 6 or 7 ladies who became members of the forum internationally. The advantage here is when they become members of the local chapter, they get links to the international chapter, which means they can interact with the ladies of directors of the International ERA Forum. And that includes a Fortune 500 company directors as well. So it's a very big boost for anybody to join this sector. Now it's in the able hands of Faisal, who have taken over, and I'm sure he's also doing an equally good job in time to come. So you can be sure that SLID will be one of the ringleaders or forceful leaders who will take these women's director positions forward. Having said that, locally also, we have been in close touch in my time with the SEC. They were very cooperative, they were very understanding, and that is how we managed to get it in the budget of, I think, 2 years ago as a was, what shall I say, precurse to get a certain number of directors onto the board. So it's in the early formative stage, and the question is arising whether it should be mandatory or encouragement. So now we believe that it should not be mandatory because it may be a little difficult to find sufficient number of directors, and not only directors, sufficient number of directors required for that section of the board. So it can be a little difficult. So initially, I would say that we plan to encourage, say first few years, that if the board has certain number of lady directors, they will be entitled to certain facilities, certain concessions and things like that, and make the board aware that there are facilities like that, and then they become aware to get lady members onto the board. So once that awareness is created and the importance is created, then we can slowly make it mandatory. There again, I would say, to start with a smaller number, then build it as you go along, and then make it a very compulsory number. Because maybe later on when we discuss, I'll tell you why the issues are there. But certainly, we have made a correct start in the right direction. Thank you.
Thank you, and I'm pleased that you mentioned this issue of mandatory quotas, which we will come back to in a moment. But you also talked about this issue of having sufficient women directors. So, Ms. De Silva, from your role at CA Sri Lanka, I know that you led the development of the Directory of Board-Ready Women, and I understand you also participated in the IFC SLID training of trainers for women on boards. So it would be great if you can reflect on what do you see is some of the value of these types of initiatives in terms of making sure there is a pool of board-ready women.
Yes, so I think it's very valuable to have the number of women that are required, like what Mr. Rasaya said, because it's academic if you say have a quota and you don't really have the pipeline. Plus also they need to be women with the right skill. So I think IFC, when IFC first put in the directory out, that was the first time I think the females of this country were aware, and I think not only females, everyone kind of became aware, the number of women that were on boards. And the first thing we realized was it was quite small, which I think also led us to ask the obvious question, why? So at CA, being the accountants we decided to check our numbers, and what we realized was that over the past several years, our statistics, we were continuously producing more than 30% of our members were female. So that's, at the moment, we have around 2,000 chartered accountants, and we have about 600 of them which are in the age group of 40 to 60, which is the category age group of directors. Plus also we looked at the contribution to the economy, because our female contribution is 36%, but we realized that the CAs that are in the formal working sector were 72%. So that means high skill level females were also in the formal working sector working, and they are not out of the formal working sector. Then we realized the IFC directory was also on the women who are already on boards. And I think when IFC and SLID promoted and we got on the budget target of 30% in 2024, CA, we decided that we also need to help to supply that pipeline. So which is why I think our founder, chairperson Aruni Rajakaria, is the person who really initiated it. We came up with a board-ready female CA member directory, and we were very tough with the criteria. So it's only women with 10 years post-qualifying experience and also 5 years in the executive levels who are eligible. So at the moment, we initially put out 50 women who were immediately ready, and we also have another pipeline that's coming up who are potential women we are training. With the SLID training, we are encouraging them to go to SLID to do the board-ready training. CA also has a 21st century board-ready model, which Dr. Ravi Fernando is conducting. So we encourage them to go to those forums and also build their profile to be ready with the criteria to be listed as board-ready women.
Wonderful, thank you. We now might turn to this question of quotas. And as we've heard already, there were initially soft quotas that were included into the budget with an intention that those would eventually become mandatory quotas. And this issue of reintroducing mandatory quotas has been under much discussion in the last few weeks. And I know there are very strong advocates on both sides of the debate for this one. So it would be great to hear from each of you, I guess, your view on whether you see that there is a role for mandatory quotas, and if so, why is that? And if not, what do you think are the alternative solutions to be getting that number well beyond this 10%? So, Mr. Balendra, we might start at your end.
Yeah, I mean, we had that debate 2 Fridays back as well with the SEC. I think, while there are so many views for and against the research, from what I have read, the research seems to indicate that mandating, the positives of mandating outweigh the negatives, right? At least for a period of time, and especially in more sort of emerging markets like Sri Lanka, and that may explain why countries like India, Pakistan, and some of the Asian countries have mandated it, while the more developed countries haven't mandated it. I think it's important where female representation is so low that there has to be intervention, and at least one director that it should be mandated. I think it'll get the momentum and get the ball rolling, and then after a few years we can remove the mandatory requirement, because then it won't matter.
And Mr. Rasaya, you've already mentioned that you don't think there needs to be a mandatory quota. So maybe we'll hear the opposite view from you first.
Yeah. Before I proceed, I had to mention our thanks on behalf of the Interior Director, the assistance given by the IFC and the Australian Aid, which was really, really encouraging at that time. And we are also aware that they are continuing to give that same support and encouragement. Yeah, why I say that, or why I feel, it's my personal, by the way, whatever I say is my personal opinion, does not represent the institute or any organization that I represent. Why I say that is because of to begin with, why I say that because the numbers that are available is very minimal. Now say today we were told that there are 300, public companies. If they have 5 directors, we have 1,500 directors. If you want 50% or 40% of them to be females, you're talking of how much? 40% of 1,500, 600 directors. Suppose 3 of them are rotated or can be in more than one place. We are looking at 200 directors, which is not a small number. Right? That is number one. And number two, even when you want a director, that specific role of the director must be defined. For example, as Anuji says, there is a fair number of finance directors. You can choose a lot. But if you get to the next stage, marketing, legal, or even for that matter, IT, the number gets reduced. If you go to technical areas like production, the number is very minimized. So therefore, to find a director for the namesake of a director can be difficult because you won't get that specific areas. So therefore, encouragement will be a better method, or rather a good method to get the number moving up. And then the publicity, right? Now we know that behind the success of every man, there's a woman involved, right? So convert that in some form as a theme in the promotion of ladies in the board. So that's also another factor that we have to take. Then third is, if you look at, we should not really look at the number of directors. As Krishan said, we should look at the base also, so that we have enough people. It's like a pyramid. You employ a fair number of people at the low end, ladies, and as they grow up, they will become directors. So there is a problem, because I'll tell you a personal experience. When we had a KPO company, it's a US company, big company, they wanted to recruit directors. Graduates as the employees. And they said that we will have, because of the fact that there are ladies around, they'll be reluctant to employ them because they get maternity leave and then they might leave. They'll have a baby room or a child room in the company. There are a few companies that are already having it. So we will introduce that concept so that we have continuity, that most of the time the child is sick or child had to be looked after, the parents have to stay behind. So that's a reluctance. So they had that. And when I went to India, I was surprised in Bangalore, it's an entire IT world. every building had said baby room, child room available. So we have to build a base and then make it mandatory. Otherwise, what can happen is that you will make, because of the fact that you have to make a director or lady director, you may not get the best.
And Ms. Anoji?
Yeah. So to me, I think the reason why is actually, as a country, I think we are losing one of the best talent pools we have by not recognizing women and giving them the opportunity to be on boards. Because we have 52% of our population who are females, and majority of them are highly educated. So the more we keep ignoring them, and coming up with all kinds of reasons why they should not be on boards, what we are losing is, as a country, the talent that we can really harness and contribute to the economy. Because I think quotas, see, like I said, if so many educated women being around, the only reason why they would not be on boards, I would say, is if anyone can say they are not competent. If they are not competent, not skilled, fine, they should not be on boards. But I don't think that's correct. So which is why I think to nudge the system and to help the country to get the best benefit of this talent, we do need a progressive quota, because that will make everyone stop coming up with reasons why you can't and find reasons as to why you can. And that will retain some of the best talent we have, because right now most of these highly educated women are not really reaching their full potential. They're stopping halfway through. I think like what Krishan said, after some time, I mean, women are ambitious. If I don't see a path where I can succeed in my career, I will say, okay, I'm not going to waste my time here. I'm not going to give my best to this company. I would much rather stay at home and help my children to succeed. Right? So, because you need to see that potential and opportunity for you to achieve. So if you put a quota, then I think when we are talking about directors, we also have to be aware we are talking about both executive and non-executive directors. And there's a huge talent pool of executive directors who are not really promoted up. Because like what Mr. Rasaya said, I think if you look inward in your companies, you will see most of the marketing divisions, the HR divisions, the production lines, you have very strong females who have the potential to be executive directors. So companies should endeavor, I think that quota should be for both executive and non-executive, and I don't think there is a lack of talent. We have enough, we have women who outnumber men, so there is no shortage of women, and that will give them the opportunity to aspire and also be ambitious and contribute to the country and bring up our dismal statistics of 36% up.
Mr. Silva, I might just stay with you for a moment. So one of the objections that we hear a lot, and we heard it at the SEC debate a few weeks ago, to this idea of having quotas for women on boards is the potential that it actually undermines those women and that they become tokens. So I guess what would be your response to that? And then very happy to hear from the gentleman on the panel as well.
So I remember when some time ago we brought in this quota for non-executive directors. We saw a lot of token male directors being appointed, right? And we also saw, because the executive directors were disturbed, they did not like these independent directors coming in, so they initially took in people they were very comfortable with. The companies that went a bit beyond, and also I've seen, like personally I've seen several instances where very good non-executive directors opting to leave or being rotated out because the executive directors didn't like that they were questioning the status quo. But down the line, now if you see, I think nobody questions the value of having non-executive directors, because they see that they bring a different aspect to the boardroom. They welcome the questioning, and I've seen over the years the reception of non-executive directors to rely on their advice and to actually take it into account has significantly grown. So tokens, I think it's common to both male and females. Initially we may have, but I don't think it will continue.
Thank you. Mr. Balendra?
I think I agree with what Anuji is saying. You're seeing quite a bit of tokenism. I've been reading about people, a lot of family members being appointed who are females. Then in some boards, they appoint board subcommittees that doesn't have the same female representation. So all the important policy and strategic decisions are made by the subcommittees, and then the board just signs off on it. So there are ways of undermining it. But like what Anuji said, you've got to start somewhere. And like the independent director, if you've mandated that a certain number of independent directors are a requirement, why not do this? There will be instances where it doesn't achieve the true objective, but you have to start somewhere. And I think with time, it will achieve its objective. So.
Mr. Rasaya, do you want to?
Just, nothing much to add on, but except the fact that you had to make a start. There's no doubt about it. As my two colleagues said, that when the independent directors were appointed, they were more appointed for the reason that you need one. But as time went past, they realized the value of it. Right? In the same way, if you do appoint lady members on the board, and once they come and they contribute, then it'll be not long before one will know the value of it. Even the facts that Lopa gave on the screen today, it shows that most of the companies or the successful companies, the fair number of ladies were on the board. So that to that extent, yes, the ladies' appointment is really beneficial to the company.
And I might stay with you, Mr. Rasaya, because I know that you have been on the boards of some of these top 30 listed companies that haven't had any women on their boards. So it would be interesting to hear from you, I guess, what are the conversations like around those board tables in terms of this issue? Is there a consciousness about it? And then, what's the view of the nominations committee, for example? Is this something that's actually on their agenda? Are they thinking about it?
Yes. Now, when it comes to the appointment of a director, it varies from one end to the other end. Basically, which I definitely will agree, and my colleagues also will agree that the appointment of the director should be based on a job content, the job requirement. So therefore, you should appoint a person who is fit for that job. First, you do not rush to appoint a lady or a gent, it doesn't matter. First, you must find the job content. Having said that, then you have to look for the director concerned. Then if you have a choice between a lady and a gent, certainly you should weigh towards the ladies, not for anything else, but for encouragement. In the number of boards that I have been, you have, as I told you earlier, it varies from one extreme to other extreme. There is a public company, which I'm sure Krishan is aware, they were very particular that X number of ladies must come. If there are 3 vacancies, they might say at 1 or possibly 2 should be ladies. Till then, they will go round and round till they find the suitable person. The other extreme is, oh, come on, we have got to appoint a director, we need a suitable person, let's get on with it. We can't pick and choose and find a lady just to fit that position, and that lady may not be competent, or lady may not be accepted to us. So therefore, the 2 extremes are there. So that is one of the reasons why I would say that there should be a lot of encouragement, a lot of incentives given for appointment of lady members, right? And as Lopa said once again, the success of, certain companies, because there are certain percentage of ladies. The other thing is, of course, the ladies, whoever I have met at the board, they have a different perspective. They approach problems possibly in a different way, and therefore their contribution also will be very different to a men.
Thank you. And I might actually also pass that similar question to Mr. Balendra, because I guess you're on the other end where you're on boards where there are women and there's been a conscious decision to do that. So how have the nominations committee and how has the board really pushed that agenda, and what have been some of the conscious things that have changed in terms of making that happen?
We've gone on the basis that from a few years back that we need to have a minimum female representation on the board. So the nominations committee will work towards that, and we have achieved that in all our listed companies, and now we are looking to increase that further and to take it. I think right now there's at least 1, but to increase that number, and we've not had a any difficulty. We have, I think, around 10 listed companies. It's not been a challenge to find ladies for board seats. So I can't see why all other companies can't do it. So, yeah.
That's good to hear. And maybe we'll, with that in mind, Mr. Silva, one of the things that we've heard a lot about is the number of women directors that we'll need if we want to get at least a 30% of women on boards. And I think it's, you know, it's somewhere in the vicinity of a further 500 women to be appointed to boards, if each board's going to have, a minimum of 3. So can you talk a bit about, I guess, how companies can go about identifying those women? Obviously, there are some directories that are currently out. What are some of the other ways that companies can actually go about identifying those qualified women for those board roles?
So I think, like I said, your executive members in your companies are your best source, I think, because they are the people you really know. You know their strengths, you're comfortable with them. And to me, one of the best methods of getting more women on boards is via the executive director route. Plus also at the moment there are 3 directories out, the IFC directory, then SLID also has a board-ready women directory, plus CA Sri Lanka also has a board-ready women directory, which also can be another source that you can really rely on. But there are enough champions who are ready to give you women if you are looking for them. So I think it's just a matter of reaching out. It's not a matter of lack of women, it's just a matter of reaching out to find the women.
And then maybe, and this is a question for all 3, on the flip side, you know, I think there's been a lot of work that's being done by SLID, by the, some of the professional bodies, by IFC, in terms of making sure there are women who are ready. But on the flip side, we need to make sure that those male board members are also ready. And I think going back to this issue of unconscious bias. So are there other things happening that are helping to, I guess, to work on that side of the puzzle? I know that SLID has been doing some training around women on boards generally, which is not just for women, but also for those board members. Are there any other initiatives and other ways that we can help to, I guess, break the bias on the male board director side? Anoji, shall I throw it to you first?
Yeah, okay. So I think if I tell you about research that the Women's Chamber did recently, this is for checking access to finance for females. We did this gender audit of a couple of banks, and to find whether the policies of the banks are gender sensitive or gender neutral. And what we found was, at the moment, all the policies in banks are gender neutral. So there is no real desire. I mean, even though they don't need to be unfair, they treat women and men equally, which is fine in a perfect world. But at the moment, I think because of the encouragement or the push that we need to give to women to access, I think one thing is the policies also have to be gender sensitive. So coming from that, I was looking at, before coming here, I was looking at some of the nomination committee compositions of a couple of boards. And what I noticed was majority of the nominations committees, even when boards where there are females, the nomination committee only has males. So I think that also to me is probably one reason why we are finding it so difficult to find women. Plus also, if you look at the objectives of the nominations committee, gender diversity is not one of them. It has to be skill. I definitely agree you should not take a woman just for the sake of the women. But having a gender sensitive policy also helps a lot. So I think that's something that companies need to work at consciously. The directors need to see whether their policies are gender sensitive.
And Mr. Balindra, I know you talked about John Keels has been doing some unconscious bias training. Is that something that's also happening at the board level?
Yes, no, not specifically. It's more at the organization level, from the lowest level. We haven't started that at the board level for the moment. But I think just to answer the previous question, every organization should have a champion, a dedicated champion for focusing on unconscious bias. So that's one way of, rather than just leaving it for ad hoc material, someone who will champion it almost full time. So that's one way where we can achieve progress.
Great. Well, I might just throw one final question out to all of the panellists, which is just, I guess, taking a bit of a step back from this idea of quotas and looking more broadly at what are some of the ways that companies, that regulators, that the stock exchange and others can really start to break this bias. I think we're seeing lots of little bits and pieces here and there, but what do you think would be some of the things that would really push the envelope? One or two things each, either in your own organisation or at the regulatory level. Mr. Rasaya, I'll start with you.
Yes, I would say there must be some form of encouragement and some form of publicity, because it's only this forum and a few forums that we are talking about lady directors. It's not a common topic, it is not a hot topic that we discuss at board rooms or at any other place. So therefore, some form of publicity, some form of promotion, with some form of slogan, as I said, we all say that beyond the success of every man, there's a woman. So in the same way, some slogan to drive the point that the importance of making lady directors the increase in the number of lady directors. So that way it is in the back of everybody's mind that yes, we should take ladies also. Because as I told you, in some of the boards that I am in, they are not even bothered. They just want another director to come in and end of story. So you can't be a loner all the time saying, we must have a lady director. It's not on. So it must be a the way John Keels is doing, they are making it a very serious point or very serious issue to have lady directors. That's number one. And also the dearth. You have to keep in mind, if John Keels has 10 listed companies, they'll take about 20 lady members, and they can't be members of another board because of conflict of interest. So the 10 listed companies, maybe shipping, hotel, leisure sector. So those ladies cannot get into the boards of other companies. So the numbers also are limited. So therefore, one is publicity, and one is to encourage the number of ladies working in the organization. Third point is, luckily, or whatever you may say, the digitalization is a new concept, which the younger people are very, like duck take into water, they learn it quickly. So therefore, the opportunities for younger directors to come is greater. So therefore, when younger directors come, the opportunity for younger lady directors also to come will be greater. So that extent, the numbers can increase.
Yeah, and I would agree, continue to give publicity, discussions like this to be widely shared, more discussions like this, more material, like the presentation we saw, which shows the business benefits. I think that's another key aspect, especially for consumer businesses, but most businesses, the business benefits of having more women in senior positions in businesses, the benefit for the country, the economy, GDP, if half the population is female, of getting more females into the workforce, the impact that can have on the economy overall. And just continuing to work. I mean, who would have imagined like 20 or 30 years ago that Parliament in India could have so many females? Right? They brought in quotas, and now it's kind of become you can do away with the quota now, because you'll have enough women contesting elections and getting into Parliament. So if you can achieve that, we've got to start from here and keep working at it. I think a lot of, like what Mr. Rasaya said, a lot of publicity can help change mindsets.
And also, I think having the conversation with the men also, because see, when you take a family, the mother and father is responsible for the child. It doesn't necessarily mean the mother has to take the entire burden of looking after the children. Because we always say, okay, women have to be made facilities for creches for them to work, but that is because you don't really have the men sometimes taking on the role. And just like Mr. Rasaya said, there is a woman behind every successful man. There is also a man behind every successful woman. I wouldn't be here without the support of my husband, who carries a lot of the responsibilities which traditionally I should have to do as a woman. So that conversation and making the men of Sri Lanka, because the men of Sri Lanka have been brought up to distinguish these roles very clearly. To say, okay, the woman's role is this, the man's role is this. it's changing. I think the younger generation is more adaptable thanks to, I think I realized, just to share a light thing, when MasterChef was being aired on Sri Lanka, that was the first time men in Sri Lanka realized that men do cook at home. And all those of you who watch HGTV, anytime there is a family going out to buy a house, it's always the man who checks the kitchen, because they always say the man is the one who's responsible for doing the cooking at home. So I think some of those conversations you have to have, because it's not a fight men against women. It's a collective effort to make the best use of the talent that we have in the country. So if women have such a talent pool, we need to facilitate to use it for the benefit of the country.
Wonderful, thank you. So I think there were three main things that stood out from what I heard from each of you. This idea of publicity and continuing to demonstrate the business case, the economic case, to continue to talk about it, not just here, but in many more forums, and to really keep this part of the consciousness as something that needs to happen. As well as this idea of strong leadership, particularly at the business side, in terms of somebody taking ownership for this and somebody really demonstrating that strong leadership from the top. And that carries over into the home and the conversations and the way things are being done at home. But then finally is this idea of also empowering women to stand up, looking for those women within the organisation who you can develop and rise up so that they're ready and able to take on those positions. So I'm going to say a huge thank you to our fabulous panel, and I think we are very fortunate that we will get to hear from a female director in more detail right now. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for the enlightening and valuable information shared. I would now like to call upon the Chairman of the Securities and Exchange Commission of Sri Lanka, Mr. Viraj Daratna, PC, to address the audience.
Your Excellency David Holly, High Commissioner of Australia and Sri Lanka, Mr. Dumit Fernando, Chairman, Colombo Stock Exchange, distinguished invitees, ladies and gentlemen. It gives me great pleasure to be part of these celebrations, to ring the bell for gender equality organized by the Colombo Stock Exchange, I think for the 7th consecutive time, in association with several other partners. Well, much has been said about gender, the importance of gender equality, as well as the importance of female participation in every sphere of life. So therefore, I will not venture to dwell on that subject, except to wholeheartedly endorse the views that were expressed by those who spoke before me. Well, we all endorse and recognize the importance of gender diversity at the workplace, and particularly in the context of the capital market in listed companies. But although we value the importance of gender diversity on the boards of listed companies, the question is, can we be content with the progress that has been made over the years to ensure that there is more female participation on the boards of listed companies? Well, in order to ensure that there is more female participation on boards, there can be different mechanisms that can be used. One is to mandate it. The other is to encourage it. The further issue that arises, if the approach of encouraging more women participation does not work, then what do we do? Well, different countries have adopted different approaches, and one approach that has been adopted is to mandate it through legislation. Well, if it is to happen through legislation, it has to be determined by the policymakers, and we have no say in the matter. So then, if we are to look at an alternative, what do we do? We will have to think of regulations And again, if it is to be regulation, then again, do we mandate it or do we encourage it? Well, there are the pros and the cons, and I don't think I need to waste your valuable time by referring to them, because already they have been referred to. Well, as the regulator, what can the SEC do to ensure that there is more female representation on the boards of listed companies? My predecessor had appointed a committee some time back comprising of representatives of the SEC, the CSE, the Ceylon Chamber of Commerce, the IFC, and various other organizations to consider the aspect of corporate governance in listed companies, what was to be included as part of the listing rules of the Colombo Stock Exchange. Although there were deliberations spanning several months, there were public consultations, but I don't think the outcome was all that satisfactory, particularly in respect of female participation on boards of listed companies. So the ladies came in delegation and met me and told me that some step will have to be taken by the SEC to ensure more female participation on the boards of listed companies. So I told them the practice that the SEC has adopted the present commission has adopted during the past 2 years was not to take any arbitrary decision, but to have stakeholder consultation before we arrived at any decision pertaining to the capital market, and that we would follow the same course of action in respect of this aspect as well. So we convened a meeting 2 to 3 weeks ago, where stakeholders were invited, and as you all know, there was a very lively and fruitful discussion. The pros and the cons were debated. Well, if the aspect of corporate governance is to come in the form of listing rules, when it affects the listed companies, then the SEC is firmly of the view that if any step is to be taken with regard to female representation in listed companies, then it should come in the form of rules to be included in the listing rules of the Colombo Stock Exchange. Now, there again, I'm not saying that it should be mandated or that it should be only in the form of encouragement. But I personally believe that there has to be some form of intervention, because as you all have already adverted to the statistics I think show that it does not happen all the time voluntarily unless there is some form of intervention. So if the stakeholders are of the view that there should be some form of intervention, let it be so, and let us decide as to what form that intervention should take. Obviously, we all agree, I think you will agree, that it has to be incremental. You cannot all of a sudden force certain things to be done, and it has to be a gradual process. So, I will not take too much of your time. Let's engage in this discussion. Of course, engaging in discussion endlessly won't help. We will have to set time limits, time frames within which we seek to achieve this. And let us engage in a meaningful dialogue and decide as to how we are going to address this issue. And let me conclude by assuring you that you will have the fullest backing of the SEC.
Thank you, Mr. Daratna. Ladies and gentlemen, as we move on to the next speaker we have with us for today, allow me to give you all a little bit of an introduction to this rather competent and accomplished individual present here today. She is a technology entrepreneur and corporate director with diverse experience in the technology business sector, both locally and internationally. She is also the Chief Executive Officer and co-founder of Aventtude. Today, Aventtude is in fact one of the fastest growing tech service startups in the modern tech space, with its branches based in Sweden and Singapore. She is also a non-executive independent director of Commercial Bank PLC and the first female director to have joined the board of a leading bank in Sri Lanka from the technology industry. She pursued her board education at Harvard Business School, and she is also a member of Women Executives on Board, which is a global network of highly qualified professionals in boards at Harvard. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my absolute pleasure to invite our keynote speaker for the day, Ms. Tushara Vijayawardena.
I'm so honored to stand here and speak to such an inspiring audience. When I got this invitation to be here today, actually I thought twice. I didn't accept it at once. Because I thought, am I good enough to be here, standing in front of you and talk about gender equality and be an example? I haven't been a women activist, women rights activist, neither I've got anything just because I'm a woman in my career, and neither I lost anything because I'm a woman in my career. So what am I going to do? Then again, I thought, this is not, and also I'm not a good speaker, to be very honest. And my family says that I don't know anything to talk other than technology, so what am I going to do here? But then again, when I thought one night, I really thought, okay, this is not about call to speak. This is about call to action. So this is exactly what I'm doing every day when I wake up. I build companies. I build companies locally, internationally, in a field where there are very, very few women are representing. And also, only thing that I got as a woman, just because I'm a woman in my career, is the award that I won as the best director this year. Best female director. So other than that, I work really hard. I had to work very smart to be successful in my field and build everything that what I have built today. So talking about this gender equality, which is a very extremely important point actually, and I was really thinking, where are we today? Because this has started in 1848, if I'm not mistaken, and we have come a long way thanks to all these great women and men who fought for gender equality. But my generation today are extremely confused with everything that's going on. Because when I look one side, I'm extremely happy because I am here today talking to you, and our voices are heard, and we are representing the top positions in the world in corporate sector and also in the public sector. In another side, when I turn around, that I see even some of the people who are close to me ask me when I talk about such an event that I have to go, they ask me, what is this big circus about women? What is really going on? Why not about men? And recently one of my very close friends asked me, when Ukraine banned 18 to 50-year-old men to leave the country, just because they have to fight for the war, why you guys don't go and fight for discrimination? And so there's like a lot of different ideas, and also my generation is a generation that we are victims of certain things that are happening, like the big push that we are doing for women to be in certain positions, because every time when we win something, when we get something, that people ask us, is it just because you are a woman? But I think our generation has to bite this bullet because this is for our daughters, and they will never be questioned if we just make this change. So that is what I thought today. Yes, I have to come here. I have to share some of my real life experience with you. I don't have a prepared speech, but I want to talk my heart out. And when I really think of a woman comes with different challenges than a man. That's why we have to talk about women, career, and women in board position. Let's look at a board position. What do you need to become a board member? You need a great network. You need a lot of talent in a very specific field, especially if you want to be a non-executive director in a board. And you have to have a successful career and a very good career track record. But how do you build all these things? Sometimes it's pretty hard for being a woman. And I can share some of this experience with you. When I started to travel to Europe, just because I want to build a network, I had to do it because of the job that I was doing that time. And also, that has really helped me today to have a lot of customers from Europe in my own company. My daughter was just 1.5 years old. And I can remember every time I take a Qatar Airways flight, because that's the fastest to go to Norway or Sweden or to Germany, and I can see that I see the map in the plane, and every time when I see that I am going far away from my home, I actually cry in the plane. And when I go to do meetings, what I do is, from morning to evening, I just pack my day, I do meetings, I come to the hotel room, I cry my heart out, because I always think of her. And the moment that I get ready, I tell my husband that, anyway, I'm going, but I don't want to pack my bag. I tell her that I'm leaving, but she has no idea about weeks and months. So I usually go for like 4 to 5 days, but still it's extremely hard. I tell her that I'm going, Mama is going, but I don't pack my bag until she goes to sleep. When she goes to sleep, I pack my bag and I just run to the airport. And I come back the sooner I can to the, sometimes my colleagues, they just take like few days to extend their time to see the country, but all what I have seen is, I may have been like 100 times to Europe now, but all what I have seen mostly is the airport, the hotel, and the office spaces and the boardrooms. So because that is the sacrifice you need to make sometimes as a woman to make things happen. It's sometimes not that hard for a man, but still it's hard. We should appreciate them. But for a woman, it comes with very specific challenges. And sometimes when I'm in a boardroom, in a board meeting, my mom used to call me and ask which milk to give her, because there are 3 different types of milk. So I had to attend to that call, and I had to excuse. In the same time, then I thought, after 2 years of time, I thought this is not going to happen, and this is not worth it. This is extremely hard for all of us, even to my family. I want to give up. And then I was about to give up. I met her preschool teacher. At that time, she was going to a preschool. She told me, she asked me, when did you come back? I said, how do you know that I'm not here? Then she told me that she was explaining the classroom with some pictures of New York, Europe, certain places and all. My daughter has raised her hand and said, look, my mama was doing a lecture here. And then I realized that how proud she has been about me, even in that small age. Then I thought, no, I don't give up. I'll become an example to her. I'll become her role model, and I'll be doing what I'm supposed to do. And then, actually, I went for my executive education to Harvard Business School, and at that time she was 9 years old. And it was really hard because she had lots of events planned in her school, and I know I'm not going to be there to make her cupcakes for the fair, and I'm not going to be there to pick her out of school like other moms. But it was really hard, and I thought a lot, but at last I made the decision, I'll use this opportunity because this is a lifetime opportunity. When I talked to my parents, they really encouraged me, and I talked to my husband, he encouraged me. So I thought, no, I'm going to take this opportunity and go. And it was really hard, and I was really crying. I can really remember the very first day at Tata Hall. I was crying my heart out again, thinking of her. And am I doing the right thing? Then I just turned the pages of my notebook just to be prepared for the next day. There I saw a line written there in her tiny letters saying, Mama, you are a bunny cop. I was like, oh my God, that bunny cop is her favorite character in Zootopia. She thinks she's a hero. and she thought I'm the bunny cop. And so that kind of support that I got from my daughter and my family made me to do things here. I think every woman deserves this kind of support. And also sometimes what I learned was that things that we think are negative all the time are not so negative. There is a positive side to this, because we can really get them involved in what we do, all the people around us, and make them feel proud about what we do. And then this journey is not so bad, like many people today told that many leave their jobs, or that many won't achieve the top. But if we can really get this support and keep everybody together, I think this journey is going to be a extremely successful and a good journey for every woman. So last, that what I want to say is, anyway, to people who misunderstand this struggle by women and criticizing, I want to tell them it is not a struggle that we want to lead. It is not like that we want to be the first, we want to be the best. It is not about falling out either. It is about that we want to walk side by side with you to build great products, great companies, great economies, and that is why we fight it, and that is what we want. So I think today we have achieved quite a lot, and it is just the few more miles that I think we need to go, and everybody can be happy that when we really achieve everything that what we want to achieve by empowering women. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Vijayawardena, for that inspiring speech. Ladies and gentlemen, as we all know, it is now time to proceed to open the market for today. To do the honors, I'd like to kindly invite on stage the following individuals. The High Commissioner of the Australian High Commission in Sri Lanka, His Excellency Mr. David Hawley, Chairman of the Colombo Stock Exchange, Mr. Dumith Fernando, Chairman of the Securities and Exchange Commission of Sri Lanka, Mr. Viraj Dayaratna, PC, keynote speaker for today, Ms. Tushara Vijayawardena, the IFC Country Manager for Sri Lanka and the Maldives, Ms. Lisa Kastner, the Chief Executive Officer of the Colombo Stock Exchange, Mr. Rajiva Bandaranaike, the Director General of the Securities and Exchange Commission of Sri Lanka, Mr. Chinthaka Mendis, the Sri Lanka Institute of Director Council member, Ms. Aroshi Nanayakara, partner at Ernst & Young, Ms. Anoji De Silva, and Program Manager, Women in Work, IFC, Ms. Sarah Twigg. Thank you, everyone. I would now like to invite the Chairman of the Colombo Stock Exchange, Mr. Dumith Fernando, to present a token of appreciation to Ms. Tushara Vijayawardena as keynote speaker for the day. Ladies and gentlemen, with that, we end today's prestigious bell-ringing ceremony organized to honor the International Women's Day 2022. Thank you very much for all your valuable time and sincere participation. Have a great day, and thank you once again.